I greet you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit who's present, and greeting each and every one of you. So, I had this, my father told me this idea, your first sermon, it's almost like a blind date. It's almost like a blind date. Dis amper so seremoniemeester dan sê hulle ook dis 'n groot eer, dis soos om die koningin te soen. Dis 'n groot eer om dit te doen, maar baie min mense wil dit doen. Dis moeilik. Dis moeilik om dit te doen. So wat preek mens op jou eerste preek? I was thinking any good sermon has 3 points. So I'm going to preach 3 points. You can put it on, Jason. I was thinking of imagining the future church. So I just want to preach on imagine, future, and church. That's all I want to preach on. I want to preach on imagine, future, and church. And as organized as I am with the 2 socks on 1 foot, I want to start with the second one, not the first one. So I want to start with church. You can go to church. Thank you, Jason. The church, donkey, was this. There was actually this place where they would come together in a town center and they would meet. And they would meet up and they would chat about stuff. Hulle sou gepraat het oor goed. Jy kan daai volgende een, next one. They would chat about stuff. So it was this place where they would come to meet and they would talk about stuff. That was the original meaning of church. Almost like a work meeting or like with now when there's no power or you're mad at something and you guys come together and you meet and you talk about something. That was the church. That was what the church is all about. Was at first was this meeting, but then Jesus came and gave that meeting a new connotation, something new that's stirring. So the church is not a building, it's not a place. Ek dink dis hoekom ek ook die beroep aanvaar het. Die eerste ding, one of the first things that stood out for me was there's no kerkbanke. Daar's nie kerkbanke in 'n kansel nie. Which I really admire. So Jesus brought this new concept of church, this community, this place where they would come to meet and talk about things, issues in life and stuff. He would come together and he would say, this I will now call church. So, seeing that a New Testament professor is here, I would like to quote a New Testament scholar, N.T. Wright. He says, thank you, Jason, we sometimes think what Jesus was doing was giving a new religion. Actually, Christianity didn't look like a religion at first. Christianity never looked like a religion. They didn't have priests. They didn't have temples. They didn't have animal sacrifices. They didn't study the oracles of Delphi. The first church was never something that was like visible there. So you never drove past a church and said, oh, there's a church. Or that daai bordjie wat sê silence, church is busy. Of stilte, dis kerk. It was never recognized as something that just stood there. So what was this church about? What was it about? The next one says, what he writes is, he says, they did things. It was this weird bunch of people who would come together, and they did things. They did things that bound them and Jesus together, like the Lord's Supper and baptism. So the first thing that caught my eye of this congregation as well was, hier eet ons. En toe sê ek, ja. So ek het in my lewe vertrou ek nie 'n maardoom nie, want hy kom nie by mense uit nie, hy eet nie by mense nie. Hy eet net nie by mense nie. So they did weird things like eat together and baptism, which was so weird. They didn't sacrifice. They would have clashed with philosophers of their day because the other philosophers knew nothing about this Jewish world. And then this massive sentence comes in. In a world where no God would come down to a human, in a world where no God would reach out to a person, they would not understand that one God might actually come into this world and transform it. No one thought of that. It's not possible. It cannot be that there's a place where a God would reach down to people, would become one of them and change and transform it. So the next one, I took this while I was making the sermon. The church looks like that. The church is us. It's meeting, eating, drinking. It's celebrating, drinking coffee, sitting in coffee shops, living, being. So when I say imagining the future church, the first concept, church, it's not a building, it's something that you see in people. Church is not a place. It never was. It never was supposed to be a place. It never was supposed to be anywhere. It was supposed to move as a body and as a spirit. So, imagining the future church starts with the first concept, that I am the church, you are the church. And when you are leaving here, the church is leaving the building. The church is leaving the building. This building is just a building. So the church, me, I am the church, you are the church. How does it work? The church works always relational, always in relationship. The church is always a relationship being. Why? Because the Trinity is it's a relationship. God the Father, the Son and the Spirit. It's a relation. Dis 'n verhouding. Dis 'n verhouding. So die kerk is mense soos ek en jy, dis gewone mense soos ons wat in verhouding staan. We live in relationships. That's what I said about relationships. So us being the church and us working as a church and us being in relationships, working as relationships, what is our goal then? If we say okay, imagine the future. So what is our goal? I'm the church. Church is no building. I'm part of the church. I'm part of the body of Christ. As I walk here, move there, I'm the church. There's a second point to imagine. Our goal as church is to imagine. Our goal as human beings is to imagine. Why? Because our goal is to create. Our goal is to create. Die Here het jou mos nie gemaak. He never created you to be something else. He created you in His image. And what is His image? Uniqueness. He created you to be unique. So you are the church. You are unique. Therefore, the destiny of this world lies upon your shoulders and my shoulders. God has no other plan for this world except the church. And the church is sitting here. So McManus, the next one, he says your identity is your destiny. And that is so powerful that I read that. Your identity is your destiny. If you sit here today and you say, oh, I'm not going to do this. You're not going to do it. You know, the best analogy to use is to say, I want to run a marathon. Everybody sits in the comfort of their homes and then they watch the comrades and say, I can do that. I think I can do that. But once you start training and once you start doing it every single day, your identity changes because your destiny changes. Because the goal or the vision becomes a reality. God, when He created humans, and this is also McManus quoting this, he says, so firstly, I'm the church, and my purpose in this life and in this world is to create, to imagine. And he says, like ants create colonies, and like bees create hives, humans were created to create. We were never supposed to be here to just exist, to merely exist. As a church, He didn't plant the church and say, hey guys, you just need to be there, put up a nice building and make it nice and make it exist. You never call a pastor to just say, let's exist. Kom ons bestaan net. Soos ek maak jou, maar jy moet net asseblief niks doen nie. He created you to create. Om te skep. Imagination is in our DNA. Imagination is in our DNA. It's the future. The future of this world depends on the church of this world that is not of this world. Genesis 1 verse 27 says, the divine creator created creatures which by nature, by default, create. Why? Because He created them in His image. Ek en jy is die kerk, vriende. En ek en jy kan nie stil sit nie. Ons kan nie hier sit nie. Want ons gaan nie uit. Maar ons kan nie net werk toe gaan nie. Wat gaan ons daar doen? Net werk. Is dit die call? Is dit wie jy is as jou identiteit om te gaan werk? We need to imagine. We need to create a new future. Why is the church not saying stuff? Why is the church not, we're fighting about the wrong things, I think, really. Like people are dying in Ukraine, but we don't really, it's far away, it's not important. There's this one, Jaco Stryder met so ding gesê, where he cursed in church, and then he said, there's a lot of children dying in Africa of hunger, and then he cursed, and then he said, now people are going to worry more about the reverend cursing in church than young children dying of hunger. What is important? What is truly, truly important? What is truly important? I am the church. My goal is to imagine and create. Imagining the church of the future. You sitting here, church, imagining moving towards the future. And what is the future? So, Dominee, dis nou lekker, jy preek mooi. Ons is die kerk en ons moet create en ons moet vorentoe gaan. Maar waarheen? Where do we go? To the future. What is the future? What is the future? Yeah, it's this unknown place. It's this, we are uncertain. It's this. But as people of Christ, we think different about the future. Why? Because of the Bible. The Bible. Imagining the future church would be to say, I am the church, and my goal is not to merely exist, but to create and to move. What must I create? A better future. Why? Because that's what Jesus did. So, everyone's scared of this book, Revelations, but Revelations is this pastoral letter that actually says, where is it all heading? Waarheen is alles op pad? Waarheen is die wêreld op pad? Ons sê altyd, waarheen is die wêreld op pad? Kyk net wat gaan aan, waarheen is die wêreld op pad? The world is on its way to heaven. Because heaven and earth must collide. Because we know what's happening after death. We know what the end is. What is the end? It's God. Because I'm the beginning and the end. So what is the future? God. What is the future? God's kingdom. And if we can connect the church, our being, with the future, we're connecting heaven and earth. And that's our goal. Is to connect heaven, connect earth. Is not to merely exist. You know, I like to read this guy, David Goggins. He says his biggest fear is coming to heaven one day and God telling him, okay, so here you are. And he tells him, well, I was this guy who was just exterminated. Well, I just pest control gedoen, and he just went to work every day. And he said his biggest fear was God putting up a chart saying, this is what I made you to be, but you decided to just exist. We were never created to exist. So there's another part which I really want to show you guys. So N.T. Wright also writes about this. He says there's like 6 chapters in life. There's the Old Testament, the New Testament, there's the story of Jesus, there's the story of the church and him coming again. And then on the 5th chapter, the fifth chapter is missing. But the 6th chapter is written. What is the 6th chapter? It's the end. What's the end? Heaven. What's the end? Heaven. It's God. It's the end. It's Him. So we have this assurity, we have this indemnity, we have this thing where we know where it's going to end. Where it's going to end, it's with God. So what are we left with now? Now the amazing thing is, if I can take the Bible as an example, there's chapters in this book. And if this is your life, it could be the same as church. There's chapters in this book that you don't like. There's chapters in this book that's not one of the best, or that's not sitting well. But the story is not finished. Because God's not finished. So, hier is ons. We are the church. We have to imagine. We have to create. We have to create the future. We have to create the future. How do we do that? Well, I could use two texts I wanted to use. The one was 1 Corinthians about the love. About truly love, seeing love. And then there's this Ephesians text where he says in Ephesians 4. So in the New Testament world, it would be like a king would come into the world, and then he would release slaves. He would come on a horse, and you would be a slave, and he would come on a horse, and he would release them, and then they would say, "Wow, I don't deserve this," and he would say, "No, this is called grace." And then in that context, it made sense. And then this king coming, and just a king would come into some place and hand out gifts. That was the New Testament context. He would ride on a horse or show it was a sign of his might and of his power to hand out gifts. And Paul writes and he says he's handing out gifts. He's handing out gifts. Why? Because I need to create a better future. What gift is he giving? There is one body and one spirit. Even as also we are called in one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and the Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Yet we worry. Yet we fear tomorrow. Yet we are scared of next week. We are scared of next month. How can we be scared if there's one Lord, one faith, one God, who is over all, through all, and in all? But unto each one of us was the grace given according to the measure of the gift of Christ. This King coming out, giving gifts. What's this gift? Wherefore he saith, when he ascended on high, he led captivity, the captives free, and he gave gifts unto men. So what is this gifts he gave? Now this, he ascended. What is it? But what that he also descends into the lower parts of earth. Wat het hy kom agterlos vir ons? Wat het hy kom gee vir ons? Soos, we were not merely created to create. We are the church. What did he leave us with to create the future? Imagination, yes. How do we do it practically? How do we put imagination and vision into actions? Well, love, you can use 1 Corinthians 12 as love. Love is part of that, but there's also these other gifts where he says, he gives evangelists, prophets, apostles, pastors, and teachers. 4 gifts. These 4 gifts are bestowed upon all of us. It's gifts handed to us. Amongst us there are apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. It's just one of the texts I can use of gifts we must use. We can also use 1 Corinthians 12. Why are we scared if we are believers? Why are Christianity a religion that is fighting more than loving? When there's a God who's loving, was bigger than he's fighting. When he was at his worst, hanging on the cross, people condemning him, killing him, he's busy suffering, he's busy dying. It's okay, Andrew, it's okay. There's a suffering God who in the midst of his suffering never retaliated. I can't imagine that. Jy weet as jy my vandag teen daai ding moet vaslaan. If you were to put me on that cross, if you were to tear off my clothes naked and I would hang there, and you would all look on me, and you would put nails in my hands and my feet, and you would laugh at me, condemn me. Hulle het hom met die vuis geslaan, gespoeg. What would my reaction be? Yes, I would. Jesus' reaction was, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. That's the future of the church. Is to reconcile. To say, listen, we need to heal this world. We are the church. We have to imagine the future. It is our purpose, it is our goal. We cannot merely exist. My biggest fear is to merely exist. My biggest fear is coming to this church, becoming a pastor, becoming a reverend, and everything stays the same. Is that what we were created for? I mean, when you go to work tomorrow, is it there to merely exist? He never created you for that. He never created you to just be. So at the end, enige goeie preek. Ek weet nie of dit 'n goeie preek was nie. Jy 3 punte. Imagining the future church. We are the church. Our purpose and goal is to imagine, to use these gifts, to use whatever God has given us, ons gawes, alles, to create a future. What is the future? Something to be scared of? No. Future is heaven. Bringing heaven to earth. And that's all. We don't need more than that.